backup alarms.
Right.
You know, that do transmit a long way. And that's one of the complaints these people have.
Maybe I'll bring it up at the next meeting in there.
Yeah, it's not, yeah, that'd be a good.
No. Well,
So, thank you, sir.
there's so much other organic.
All right.
So,
I'd like to call to order the April 4th meeting of the Goochland County Planning Commission. Mrs. Parker, do we have a quorum?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum.
Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father God, we come before your heavenly throne with thanks and praise. We thank you for all the blessings of this life. We thank you for allowing us to grow up in a free country as free citizens. And we thank you for allowing us to gather here to do the work of the good citizens of Goochland County. We ask that you give us the guidance and wisdom to do what is right by you and by our fellow citizens. In your name we pray.
Amen. Thank you. Prior to getting to number 4, I would just like to say thank you to Mrs. Sarah Worley for all of her time helping the Planning Commission. And I'm sure that the rest of us here all agree that she's been a huge help to us, and we will miss her. This is her last night helping us out. But fortunately, we have Mrs. Parker, who will be taking over the reins and keeping us in line. So, thank you, Mrs. Worley, and Ms. Parker, back to you.
Our first item is the election of the officers for chair and vice chair. In January, Mr. Myers and Mr. Duke were on a nominating committee to make a recommendation for chair and vice chair. Would the nominating committee like to make their recommendation?
Yeah. We have nominated Mr. Matt Brewer as the next chairman and myself as the vice chairman.
And we need a motion and a vote.
I make a motion we accept the nominating committee's recommendation.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have the approval of the minutes.
Everyone had time to review the minutes?
Yes.
Any
I
questions?
move that we approve the minutes as written and submitted.
I second it.
Motion and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll now open the citizen comment period. This is for anything not on the agenda this evening. Please come forward, state your name, address. We'll give you 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Linda Moore. I live at 2164 Prophet Road, Mannequin-Sabbath. I would like to thank each and every one of you that is on the Planning Commission, Ms. Tara McGee, Sarah, and Ms. Peters Parker.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. I know you spend an enormous amount of your free time trying to meet the needs of the Planning Commission. I thank you so much for listening to members of Goochland, citizens of Goochland County. I also would like to thank you for all the work you did last month in reviewing the Commission's bylaws, Ms. Tara. It means an awful lot to us as citizens to try to follow the rules and on the time limits and everything, and learn as much as we can about the process. Mr. Duke, you asked whether or not citizens attend the comp plan and the rewrite. We're trying to get up to speed. It is very difficult sometimes for us to make it to these meetings. We try. We get bombarded with sometimes overzealous misinformation, and we don't always get it right. We thank you for your patience with us as we try to figure it out and do our best to be good neighbors and good citizens. All of you all do enormous amount of work, and you're not appreciated. I hope that people do understand that your time is valuable, and you've done an awful lot for us. Have a nice meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for anything not on the agenda tonight?
Good evening. My name is Vivian Smith, and the reason I live at 2792 Chapel Hill Road, Goochland, Virginia. And the reason for me being here today is that I have a petition of citizens on Chapel Hill Road and Riddles Bridge Road is complaining about the biopsy waste that be put down on the fields, and it's very strong and it's got to be hazardous to your health. And I have a health issue, heart problems.
Ma'am? I'm sorry, Tara McGee. Is this about biosolids?
Yes.
Okay, that's a case on the agenda tonight.
Oh.
So if you could come speak when that case is heard, that would be appropriate. This time is for if it has nothing to do with something on the agenda. So we'd be happy to hear from you at that time. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak about anything not on the agenda this evening? Seeing no one, we'll close the citizen comment period. Mrs. Parker?
We have no request to defer additions, deletions, or changes to the order of the public hearing. So our first item in the public hearing tonight is in District 2, CU 2014-00003A, application filed by 4L Corporation requesting to renew a conditional use permit to allow storage of biosolids on tax map 28-1-0-122-0. The property is zoned A1 Agricultural General and is 110.3 acres. The conditional use permit is required by Article 2, Section 339 of the Goochland County Zoning Ordinance. The comprehensive plan designates this area as rural enhancement area.
Chairman Brewer, members of the Commission, Debbie Bird, Assistant Director of Community Development. This is a renewal of a conditional use permit issued originally in 2014. It is for a routine biosolids storage facility. It's on tax parcel 28-1-0-122, which is accessed off of 2801 Chapel Hill Road. Zoning's A1 and land use is rural enhancement. Just to explain a little bit about biosolids, since I think some of you weren't here when this was originally brought up in 2014. The biosolids is actually a byproduct of the wastewater treatment plants and the residue that comes out of them. The program is regulated by the state's Office of Department of Environmental Quality, and localities must allow this material if it's done through DEQ's permitted process to be used. Material is typically used, it is used as fertilizer, and it's brought to these fields that the farmers that are as part of this program and spread as fertilizer on these fields. The storage facility allows the storage of the material either until they have enough material to use on a particular facility or field that they want to do, or in times when the fields are too wet to get onto them. Things like that they need a place to put it, and before we had the storage facility, this stuff was just stored in the fields, and this gives a confined space that's got measures to handle that runoff and things like that, and they can deal with it in that manner. And the material that's stored at this facility is used on the fields in Goochland County itself. So the facility is in the center portion of the county. Comprehensive plan, as I said, shows it as rural enhancement. It is zoned A1. Looking at the aerial photograph, you can see the red circle there. That's where the facility is actually located. The entrance to this property is off of Chapel Hill. And what I've got highlighted in here is all the properties that 4L, the applicant in this application, has and makes up the farm that this facility is located on. Again, here's a closer in view of the parcel where the facility is located. We're going to zoom in a little more, and this is the actual photograph of the facility. You can see the back part here is the tented part that's covered where the material is typically stored. The front area out here is a paved area that they have to move the material and manage the material for getting it for transport and things like that. This was the site plan that was originally submitted when the facility was built. At the entrance on Chapel Hill, they do have a sign that clearly marks this is the entrance to it so that the vehicles utilizing this facility know where to go. And here's some photographs from the facility. As you can see, it's pretty large. It holds a good volume of material. And then in the back corner right here is the leachate collection facility. So it has all the things that DEQ has required for this to meet their standards. Community meeting was held on February 13th. There were 4 neighbors that attended. We had 2 board members, Ms. Lascalette, Mr. Alvarez. We had 2 planning commission members, Mr. Duke and Mr. Myers. And they had lots of questions about the operation of the facility, which were answered by Mr. Lanier. And the questions were typically about changes from the previous permit to this permit, concerns about the time that the activities go on there, the noise associated with those activities, the types of vehicles used to transport the material both to the site from the plants and from this facility to the fields where it's applied, and how often inspections were made on the facility and who actually makes those inspections. The CvP conditions, this is the marked up version from the original, and if you'll see there's lots of crossouts. The reason for that is when this original CUP was approved, we did not have a section in the code that addressed this type of facility because this was the first one. Since then, we have taken most of these conditions and they've actually been codified into the code. And so since they're in the code, there isn't the need to then have the condition in the CUP because they're already taken care of and have to be adhered to by being in the code. So that being said, I'm going to just go through and show you what we will have in this particular application. The first one is use, and the use is it is a biosolids routine storage facility. The second condition is going to be lighting, and it says all exterior lighting will be dark sky compliant. The third condition is that the site plan that was submitted, that all improvements shall generally conform to that conceptual site plan as attached in Exhibit A. The next condition is setbacks. The code has setbacks in it, and the setbacks that are established in the code are 750 feet from the nearest residential use, which this restates. But in the code, it says you only have to be 100 feet from the nearest stream or wetland. And the applicant has proffered that he will be 200 feet away from there instead of the 100. So he's given us an additional buffer for that setback. The next condition is hours of operation. This was not contained in the original CUP. The applicant has said he's willing to do this. Hopefully it will address some of the concerns of the neighbors. So we've set up, per his request, that the hours of operation will be between 5 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. And the way those hours are set up typical to correspond to farm operations, which is what this falls under, just like anybody that would be applying fertilizer to the land, which essentially this is. These are the typical hours that the farm operates. Next condition is that DEQ approval. The facility has to be in compliance and have valid permits from DEQ. If we find that he's not in compliance with any of those permits, this CUP could be revoked. Next one is the standard transfer of ownership release. It's with most CUPs. The expiration on this is a little different in that because he has a state permit for this facility, we are timing the expiration of this to coincide with the expiration date of the state permit. So as he gets a new state permit and they may have conditions or have things that come up with that, we'll be able to take that forward into our next CUP and make sure that they're aligned. The last two conditions that were stricken were combined with some others, or one that, as I said before, it was the approval of the coded options, which we did do. That's the presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Ms. Bird, from what I understand, for 150 years or so in this country, untreated animal waste were used as fertilizers. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
There still isn't any prohibition on that, is it?
No.
Okay. What would you say, as an environmental scientist, would be the main difference between treated human waste out of sewage treatment plants and using the animal waste?
Well, I think one difference is that, as you said, the human waste is treated. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying it's how much it's treated or whether or not there's still things in it that people would not like to see put on the land, but it does go through a process, and it's tested before, it's tested after. The other thing that you get out of this is for them to be able to be in the program and have the material applied on their land, the land also has to be tested. So you at least have a sort of a track record of what the land was like, where it is at any time, you know what's been put on it, you know where it came from, you have the testing results from the material that's put on there. And part of what that also does is that if you only need 10 pounds of fertilizer to get you where you need to be for the particular crop or whatever you're doing, that's all the state allows you to put down. You can't over-fertilize under this program. With the animal waste, there is no regulation. You can put as much as you want. You can put it anywhere you want. We have setbacks from adjacent properties. There's none of that under the animal waste. So again, we have people that come out and inspect to make sure that they're adhering to the regulations. And with the processes that have been come into use with these wastewater treatment plants, I'm not saying it's completely gone away, but say from 10 years ago, the things that were commonly our complaints, such as the smell and things like that, have greatly reduced. I would say the last 5 years, the complaints we really get now, whenever somebody calls and it's like, they're doing something horrible out there. Typically it is the animal waste because it's not treated. Also with the treatment of these wastewater treatment plants, the treatment process, there are actually two processes that they can go through. One is a Class A product and one is a Class B. The Class B product is your typical plant, and it is the least treated of those, and will have some more of the effects of smell and things like that. I would say the great majority of our product that we get, and Mr. Lanier can confirm or give you better statistics on this probably, but the Class A material goes through such a treatment process that producers of that are allowed to bag it and sell it as fertilizer at any store. So like Home Depot, Lowe's, if you go in there, you will see bags of this material that are there. That product, because of the treatment process it goes through, it really has no odor and things like that associated with it.
Well, safety-wise, what do you think the difference between this and the inorganic fertilizers with the contains the nitrates and phosphates and other things?
I don't feel comfortable answering that just because I'm not an expert on that, but
Perhaps
I would refer you to DEQ for
I was gonna
that.
say, perhaps the appropriate response is that DEQ heavily regulates this, but then also permits it.
Okay.
And so probably the most important condition in our CUP is comply with everything in your DEQ permit, and a violation of your DEQ permit, we can pull your CUP. That encompasses more than all of this here, because I only printed off some of the DEQ regulations, but that's a significant condition.
So the process, I guess, it's, and this is coming from some years ago, it's digested, if you will, the type A biosolids. I guess, what is the frequency of the testing and what are they testing for?
My understanding is it's tested before it leaves the plant. So that knows what kind of products we're getting. And then the field itself is tested on a certain schedule. Again, all of these schedules are laid out in their DEQ permit. And again, part of the testing schedule changes because if you, some places where they apply, they may apply only like once every 3 years. So the testing for that would be different than someone that applies it every year because of the way of their amounts he's applying, lets them do it on a more frequent basis. So it's kind of hard to tell, but the material is tested before it leaves the plant. It's tested where it's put on the ground, and then all of those records are kept through DEQ.
So, as you know, we require a CUP for this process. So, are those test results shared with the county?
Yes, we have access to those at any time through the state.
All right.
Do you know how many DEQ inspectors we have for the state?
I think there are either 4 or 5. They've had some vacancies, but it's about that many.
And they cover the entire state?
They do cover the entire state, but what the state also does is they have a program where localities can adopt or elect to become biosolids monitors, which Goochland has done. There's 3 of us here at the county that are certified to do that. And our job is to, when we get a notice that they're going to field apply, we send someone out there and he verifies that they're adhering to the setbacks. We're verifying that the guy has the tickets he needs to be able to be there. We verify that he hasn't tracked or that the vehicles are not leaking, things like that. The nice thing about the monitoring program is that although we can monitor and see these things and report on them and give our citizens a little more comfort that someone's watching them locally, the enforcement of that, the burden of that does not fall on us. If we find violations, if we find there are issues, things like that, the way this program works is those are referred to DEQ, and DEQ does all the enforcement actions for that. But we are the local eyes and ears.
Well, since this initial use permit was permitted, has there been any violations and reported incidents?
No.
Any other questions?
So the CUP we're looking at tonight is not whether they can spread it or what it is, it's whether they can store it, right?
Correct.
Right. So that has nothing to do with the safety of the material itself going to the fields. It's just the safety of that area, which is
The actual storage facility.
There is a monitoring port on site.
Yes.
Right. You said initially that locality, DEQ says the locality must allow this.
If a provider, NutriBlend, for instance, who is this one, gets a permit from DEQ to land apply this material, then the locality has to let them do that.
Right. So then it needs to be stored somewhere safe.
If they don't have a storage facility, then the way it works is under the program, when the material is delivered to the site where it's going to be applied, of course, sometimes they have to stockpile enough to be able to run the equipment they need to do it. Under the regular program, they're allowed to store that material on site in the field for up to 7 days. So if it doesn't go to a facility like this, you have areas where this will be just sitting out there, out to the elements, exposed, all of that.
In a year like we've just had, where we've had rain every 2 days, it was pretty much, they would not be able to work.
Right.
You know, so
And they
have
do
to
not,
store it.
they do not field apply when it's
Right.
wet and you can't get in the
Yeah,
fields.
so they have to store it until they can use it. I mean, it's
Yes.
gotta go somewhere. This is a safe alternative.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bird.
Would the applicant like to come forward?
My name is Owen Lanier. I'm Vice President of 4L Corporation and the person that manages the biosolids application process in Goochland for NutriBlend.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Lanier? Have any other comments?
No, Ms. Bird handled everything pretty well, and I will be available to answer any questions that may come up before we're finished.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We will now open the public hearing. Please come forward, state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Vivian Smith. I live at 2792 Chapel Hill Road, Goochland, Virginia. I have a petition here from the citizens on 27 Chapel on Riddlesbridge Road and Chapel Hill Road. The reason I'm here tonight is because it's been several years now we had to put up with the topsoil being put down on our fields. And as you can see from the pictures where he stored a box of soil that's wide open, you still can smell it. And it's so strong, and we can't enjoy outside cookouts. This be going on for 4 months in the summertime every year. And you know, and it's got to be hazardous to your health because it's so strong, you know. And so that's why I'm here, to try to stop this soil to be placed on fields and put down. And like I say, I got a petition with the citizens, that the houses that I went to, that feels the same way. We go through this every year, and yes, ever since 2014. It's 2019 now. And it's just too strong. You can't go outside, you can't enjoy your house. Now, like he said, that's 2801. I live at 2792. My brother right beside me live at 2800. So that's 2801. He lives at 2800, and I live at 27. We right there at it. And no, we can't enjoy this. And I'm starting right here to see what we can do about it. I know y'all say it's safety, health-wise, but have anybody actually tested or know that for a fact? Because it's too strong. Actually, it even seeps inside my house. That's how strong it is, because I guess that's how close it is. But anywhere on Chapel Hill and Riddlesbridge Road, you can smell this strong smell that is terrible. And I want to start here, and I want to go to 12 on my side. I want to go to anybody that's willing to listen.
Would you mind sharing your petition signature list with
Yes.
Ms. Parker, please? Thank you.
So anyway, that's all I have for today.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who, please come forward. Ms. Parker, would you share that with us, please?
My name is Frank Grubbs. I live on 4065 Whitehall Road. What I want to talk about is, why do you want to renew another conditional use permit when the 2014 is out of compliance? I just want to give you a few of the things, as y'all saw in the photo. There was no truck cleaning facility there. We had biosol in Whitehall Road. I went to Goochland. I was told by the planning and zoning they did not need a cleaning facility there. I also asked about a 5-foot fence that was gated when not in use. I guess y'all saw from the photos, there was not a gate or a fence there. I don't understand why all of these things was in the 2014 conditional use permit and they was not complied to. Also, there's no building code certification. That means no building permit. I went to the Goochland County Building Inspector's office. They said they had no record of a building permit for this sewage facility. I also went to the Commissioner of Revenue, and they said no tax has been paid. I have all that information right here if y'all would like to have it. So that was one of the things that really bothered me. I'm like, you know, something this big where Goochland gives a conditional use permit and no tax has been paid, no building permit. I mean, we need to wake up a little bit.
Would you share that with Ms. Parker, please?
Yes. The only permit that has been issued was the 2014 conditional use permit. There's no other permits. Like I said, a building permit, electrical permit, or any other permit. I think before this conditional use permit is passed, all previous conditions must be met, and planning and zoning should be accountable to make sure they are. Let's go down to safety. Safety on this, on the new permit, it says there's been no issues. Well, there have been an overturned truck on Chapel Hill Road at night, turned over, shut down Chapel Hill Road. I don't know why they say it's no safety issues. Some have run in the ditch on Whitehall Road. One broke down on Whitehall Road before dawn. No flares, no safety cones, no nothing. We have a safety issue with these trucks going up and down the road, not only bringing bowel soil in, but also hauling it out. I think every truck hauling bowel soil should be Virginia safety state inspected. And the driver should be CDL certified because they make daily inspections. Also, in the Goochland County Code of Ordinance, Section 7, number 11, there's supposed to be a $5 million liability insurance policy submitted to Goochland County, which I talked to David Bird about, and she said none has been submitted to cover a case for accidents or anything. I have that if y'all would like that too.
You can share that with Mrs. Parker.
Okay. Let's see. But I'll agree with the previous lady that spoke. I live on Whitehall Road, and I do smell the odor sometime on these heavy air days. I know when y'all know the air is heavy, you're trying to have a cookout, and you can get wind of this bowel soil every now and then. Sometimes you just got to go back in the house. And then as far as at 5 o'clock in the morning, that's pretty early. I mean, you're running these trucks through a residential neighborhood. Then it kind of running from 5 in the morning, 6 at night. Nobody's even mentioned anything about school buses.
Sir, you are over time.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I have a question for staff in relationship to the one item that was brought up during the public hearing with regard to the liability policy.
We do not have on file with us the liability policy. After Mr. Grubbs came and asked me about that, I did contact the state. That is a document that would be filed with them, not us. They did send me over a copy of the document. I'm glad for Mr. Grubbs to look at it. I just got it the other day, so we do have that.
Okay.
If I can address a couple of these other issues.
Yes, ma'am.
They did not have to get a building permit. Farm building, it's exempt from building.
It's an
But we did get a
accessory.
certification from the state where they had a professional engineer certify that it did meet all the code requirements, and that was in our hands before we allowed the
Is that
building.
typically a $50 permit or something like that to construct a barn or a?
No. Ag buildings are exempt.
Okay.
So they don't even need a permit.
Great.
If I can go back to this aerial photograph. Oops, sorry. On the site plan here of the facility where we blew up, if you look on this plan, you'll see there is a fence right here. It's gated here, it's gated here. So the entire facility is fenced. Staff went out and verified that is a 5-foot fence.
What's the composition of the fence?
It is a typical farm fence. It's post with wire between it. I will say, not every pole is 5 foot, but it's like 4'10", 4'11", 5'2". Again, it's got cows that are out there and they walk around, and that's what it is. The truck cleaning facility, they do have a way on this site that if they need to wash the tires and such of the trucks, they can do that. Again, Mr. Lanier can speak to exactly how they do that, but I know they do have the facility here. Be honest, I haven't seen it in operation, but everything is there to do that, which is one of the reasons where the leachate collection system is also set up so that as they wash that material and goes into that and is collected, it doesn't go off site. Trucks, I know we had talked to Ms. McGee about the trucks, and they are permitted as they are. They're farm vehicles that they, and I would let Ms. McGee speak to that. But
I may not be able to cite exactly, but again, part of the reason why I went through the DEQ regulations on this is because it's heavily regulated. We are not entitled to contradict the DEQ regulations, and so we would be unable to require CLD drivers or Virginia inspected vehicles. There are regulations specific to the vehicles and how they have to be covered, when they have to be covered and so forth, but that's not an area that we could regulate.
Yeah, I followed 4 large German tractors this morning down the road fence with covered trailers, very large tractors, and they were all covered, and they were spreading something or on their way to spread something. But fortunately for me and my family, there was no odor. So.
I think that hit all the questions if you have
Question I
more.
have regarding the truck cleanup, they have a truck cleaning facility, but the question is, do they use it? And if it's spreading up and down the road, I'm assuming it's there, but it's not being used.
Well,
I'm not, just going by what the gentleman said.
right. I mean,
and down the road.
the material is brought here and then dumped out of the trucks, and then of course as it dumps out, it may get up on the truck, things like that. So they clean them before they leave the site, after they've dumped the material. Now, if they're picking up material to then take to a field to apply, again, I think the thing they have to look out for is that there's no material on the vehicles hanging off, leaching out, leaking out, those kinds of things. And again, I would let Mr. Lanier explain exactly how he does that, but they do have the facility there and the ability to do that.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Mr.
Mr. Grubbs said something about a violation that we needed to be aware of. Is this a violation of some sort with zoning that you're aware of that we're not aware of? Okay. Is that what, Mr. Grubbs, is that what you said? There was some zoning, something that they were in violation of that we need to be made aware of? No, you said something about that we as zoning commission, the planning commission needed to be made aware of, what was going on, that they weren't meeting what they were supposed to be doing, and I wanted to, if that's the case, then we.
What I was talking about is the previous 2014 condition conditional use permit, you know, somebody should be checking to make sure all these conditions are met.
And that's,
And we are.
and we are, okay.
And we are,
Okay.
we've met those.
Okay.
Okay.
And with the cleaning of the trucks, this, again, we're just talking about this storage facility. We're not talking about spreading it.
Correct.
Spreading it is regulated by someone completely different, doesn't go through planning.
It's a different permit.
Right. So this facility, I mean, I've been there because of, you know, the community meeting. It's thousands of feet from the road. It's not like if it's on the tires, it's gonna make it back to the street. I don't, I mean, it's just a long ways
It is.
to this facility from the street.
You can see, it's a long way.
What is the closest residence in feet? Did we get a rough mark on that? Ballpark?
Oh, you will ask me that. It's more than 750 feet. I think it's more like 1,000 to 1,200 if I remember.
Okay.
I should have pulled that, I forgot.
Yeah.
All right.
Over a mile. Okay. Yeah. Just so you know, and Mr. Grubbs, his property is up in here. Is that correct, Mr. Grubbs? Right up in here? Oh, on this down here? That one right there? It's on this parcel.
So you feel, I mean, that this building is causing the smell, or the spreading of it is causing the smell? I mean, obviously, they have to just have the building in order to spread it, but I mean, it doesn't, you know, what we're approving or disapproving is the building, not the spreading of it. The spreading of it is approved, you know, by someone else.
You can smell it when they're stirring it up, when they're pushing it up. It's kind of like brewing a pot of tea. It's stinking when they stir it up a little bit.
Okay.
You can smell it from the storage facility. As far as the land use, it stays out there about a day or so, and then it kind of dissipates because I think the grass feeds off of it and stuff. But as far as the storage facility, it just brews. Especially since the DEQ has let them start.
Sir, you need to come to the microphone.
Yes, yeah, please come forward. If,
To my understanding from my understanding what the DEQ says
Thank you,
is
Mr. Arm.
they're not only storing it inside the shed, now they are also letting them store it on the outside of the shed, which they are supposed to be covering it up. I don't know. But once that solid gets wet, it starts to brew and put her odor off as it sits there on a pad, not being covered up.
all right, thank you.
Wait a minute, Mr., just a minute. Before you brought something up about the taxes not being paid. Why did you bring that up?
Yes, sir. Why did I bring that up?
Yeah.
Because that was in the 2014 conditional use permit, that it need to be a building certified, which Ms. Bird, I guess she clarified me, but I thought every farm building, I have built farm buildings before, and I have to get a permit. Well, I was told by the Goochland County Building Permit that you have to get one. You don't have to pay the fee, but you need to get a permit so that the Commissioner of Revenue will know how much to tax that building that you did build one. That's why this has slipped through the cracks, and I think it has not been getting paid tax on, because it was not the proper building permits through Goochland County, even though it was the state responsibility.
Did we see something with an assessment on it?
Yeah, I mean, that's not our purview.
Yeah, I was
Right,
just
I mean-
wondering why, because.
Thank you.
Yeah, assessor did look into this, and the property prior had not been being taxed. Mary Ann did go back and look at it and has corrected that since then. And so it is currently on the tax rolls and will be taxed from this point forward.
So it'd be like a
And-
pole barn that wasn't inspected, and then.
Right,
and
because
then-
since it didn't have a permit in the
Correct.
system, which is how they pick up these things, it got missed.
Okay,
And that's been corrected.
all right. Do we have any questions? Any further comments? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve it as written.
We have a motion. We have a second. All of those in favor? Aye. Motion carries for recommendation for approval.
Our second case tonight is in District 3, CU 2019-00005. Application filed by Cellco Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless, requesting a conditional use permit to construct and maintain a 199-foot telecommunication tower on tax map number 43-1-0-69-0 in the vicinity of 1991 Hawktown Road, approximately a quarter-mile northwest of Fairground Road. The property is zoned A2 Agricultural Limited and is 24.3 acres. The conditional use permit is required by Article 3, Section 330 of the Goochland County Zoning Ordinance. The comprehensive plan designates this area as rural enhancement area.
Good evening, Greg Garrison, Principal Planner. This is a request for a conditional use permit to construct a telecommunication tower on tax map 43-1-0-69-0. Site is located in the central portion of the county. 2035 comprehensive plan recommends rural enhancement for this area and the surrounding areas. Site is currently zoned agriculture limited, and just to the south is Breeze Hill subdivision and Lanes End subdivision, which is zoned rural residential. Site is mostly wooded except for the front portion right along Hawktown Road. I only point that out because that's the area where the tower is going to be most visible. A community meeting was held on February 27th, 2019, and a balloon test was held the next day on February 28th, 2019. At the community meeting, staff, board member Mr. Alvarez, and 5 citizens attended that meeting, and there were questions regarding health concerns and visibility. The tower will be a little over 380 feet from Hawktown Road. There is a significant amount of large trees that will remain between the road and the tower, and the tower will be sited to fall completely within the boundary, within the property. This is the balloon test. That circle represents the balloon. If you're having a hard time seeing it, it's the little dot right in the middle there. This picture was taken from Hawktown Road, and you can see the field, the open field right there. This is another shot. This is a photo simulation that was provided by the applicant. Shows the tower, again, with the circle. And this was also taken along Hawktown Road. Another shot there, photo simulation. And another one, which the tower's not really visible due to the existing trees. This is the exhibit. It's hard to see, but the tower is about 380 feet from Hawktown Road. This shows the radius, the fall zone, and it's completely within the property. The applicant's been made aware also that we did point out that the intersection tying into Hawktown Road will be more of a 90-degree perpendicular type of entrance. They're fine with that. Should the commission recommend approval of this request, the following conditions are recommended. You do have some amended conditions in front of you, specifically condition number 11. I'll go through those conditions. Number 1, communication tower may be constructed on this property subject to these conditions. Number 2 just deals with the site plan as shown as Exhibit A. Number 3, prior to any construction, a plan development will need to be approved. Number 4 deals with the height, limiting it to 199 feet. Number 5 deals with the FFA and FCC regulations. Number 6 deals with the security and the fence. No barbed wire shall be used. Number 7 deals with the interference with radio, television, satellite, etc. Number 8 deals with the color, non-reflective, neutral color from the base to the top. Number 9 deals with the buffer. Existing vegetation can be used, and this will be determined at the time of the approval of the plan of development. Number 10 is a long condition. This is the co-location condition. The applicant does have some concerns with this condition, and They're here to present their case to discuss this condition further. Number 11 deals with the time limits. This is the one that was amended. Construction shall commence within 2 years of final approval. Previously, it was 18 months, but state law requires 2 years minimum. Number 12 deals with the internal access road. This is another condition that the applicant would like to discuss a little further. Goochland Fire and Rescue requires 20-foot wide. The applicant would prefer a little bit narrower road. And number 13 deals with the expiration and removal. And number 14 is our standard transfer or lease of the property. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant is also available to answer any questions that you may have. Like I said, I think there are a few conditions that they have some concerns with, and they are here to present their case.
Any questions for Mr. Garrison?
Just out of curiosity, on number 6, the prohibition for the barbed wire, was that something that the county required or something that the applicant just?
No, that's something that we've used in the past. It's a standard, yeah, standard condition that's just been.
I mean, is it a visual thing or what?
I assume that's probably where it originated from, more of a visual thing.
Because I thought it usually around a little enclosure where the electronics.
Correct.
Is, and I would think that there was something that you would want protected. I mean,
it's certainly something that if we wanted to tweak that condition, if the applicant preferred the barbed wire, I think it's just been something that's been handed down, standardized.
Any other questions for Mr. Garrison? Thank you. Would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Lori Schweller. I'm an attorney with Williams Mullen representing Verizon Wireless. And also with me tonight is Stuart Squire, who is the zoning manager for this site with GD Insights, a consultant for Verizon Wireless. Thanks very much. I have a presentation here. I'll try to move quickly through things that, thank you. Okay. That Mr. Garrison has already covered with you. As you can see, the site is located on a heavily wooded property, and it is zoned agricultural. It's a fairly large tract with 24 acres. This overall site plan is to show you the distance from the road and also the distance to the closest dwelling, which is a little over 689 feet. And it does meet all of the setbacks under the zoning ordinance. The lease area is 100 by 100, and the compound within that, where we would have our fencing and our landscaping, is 60 by 60. Along the access road would be utility lines laid for power and fiber. And this is just a closer up view of the facility compound. The support structure itself would be a monopole, not a lattice tower, so it would have the slimmest possible profile. It would be matte galvanized steel, 195 feet tall with a 4-foot lightning rod, and there would be room for additional wireless providers on the support structure. No lighting would be required at all since it would be lower than 200 feet. Verizon will comply with all federal, state, and local requirements, of course. At the balloon test on February 28th, we took photographs from all the surrounding roadways, and this map shows you the locations from which those photographs were taken to give a good sample from the surrounding area. The ones that are marked in red are locations where the balloon was visible, and the ones marked in blue are locations where the balloon was not visible. So you can see that the balloon was visible primarily on the stretch of Hawktown Road, just along in front of the site. And we wanted particularly to get those photographs at the views marked 2 and 3 because of some questions from a couple of homeowners who wanted to know what that visibility would be from their homes. So from the farthest point to the north, you can see the site would be visible through the trees. And obviously, we did this in the winter months when there were no leaves on the trees, so visibility is going to be considerably less when the leaves come out on the trees. And this is the view from 1900 Hawktown Drive. And again, we are on the road. We are not on anyone's property. So as you go back onto the property, we don't expect there to be visibility from the homes from which we're taking these photographs. And again, with the leaves on the trees, you'll have even less visibility. That's obviously a photo simulation there created from the balloon. And this is that other location we were interested in at 1850. This is caddy corner to the entrance. You can even see the zoning sign there in yellow at the entrance to the site. All these other locations, the balloon was not visible, and so photo simulations were obviously not created from these, but just to give you a sense of how well screened it is from all the surrounding areas. There is one more location just south of the site. It's visible through the trees. There's an arrow pointing there, but it won't be, there won't be much visibility at all when the leaves have come out there. Just to point out, the site is important. Verizon Wireless is trying to expand the network. An interesting data point is that over 52% of Americans now no longer have wireline telephones. So wireless is more important than ever. We're using many different devices in our homes. The average home has 13 connected devices, including tablets, and people are trying to work from home, so wireless service is very important. I'm hearing from neighbors that service in this area is not optimum. Another important point is that according to, depends on which government source you look at, but over 70% of 911 calls are made by wireless devices, so it's important for health and safety. And I want to emphasize that Verizon is proposing a new site because there are no co-location opportunities. Our first objective would always be to co-locate on an existing support structure, tower, or other structure if there were one, but there isn't one available in the area. So I would like to take a moment to talk about the conditions. Verizon Wireless is fine with all of the conditions Mr. Garrison described, except there are two I need to discuss. The first one has already been, the second one has already been taken care of in your amended conditions. But the county co-location and the access road I'd like to talk with you a little bit about. For the county co-location, Verizon Wireless is willing to provide the county a right of first refusal as described in your condition. The difference in the language, and this is the last language that we presented to Ms. Jackson, but because we didn't get to follow up, she and I didn't follow up to finalize that language today. It's not in front of you, but I think we can come to an agreement before the Board of Supervisors. But this is what Verizon Wireless would like to offer the county: a right of first refusal, so that if another wireless provider comes along and says, we want, let's say, 140 on the pole, then Verizon Wireless would provide to the county a notice of that provider's interest, and the county would have a time within which to exercise the right of first refusal. The way it's written right now is if the county doesn't respond at all in 30 days, then that right goes away. And so we want to keep that. But if the county does respond and is interested in exercising that right, Verizon would like to ask that the county enter into a binding letter of intent within 60 days, some sort of agreement, so that they're not holding that site. The way the language is written now, they would actually have to hold the site for 6 months before they could then go back to that other provider and lease up the site. So that's the main difference. It's a time difference. The other main difference is that we're talking about presenting your interest to Verizon's third-party tower manager, which accepts all of the co-location incoming requests, whether it's local government or other providers. and they work on the leases and evaluate the structure and all that type of thing. It's not a free right of co-location. That's the big difference. So the two things, a shortened time frame to commit, and then just a regular rent like any other co-locator. So that's the county co-location, the first condition. The third one that I wanted to bring up with you is our understanding from talking with your county attorneys and with your fire marshal is that the county code has incorporated into it certain regulations, fire regulations. And so our initial reaction was, well, if the county code already has these access road requirements, we don't need the condition, just like you saw for the Lanier application. But if we were to have this condition, what we would like to do is to have a 12-foot access road, because our easements are 20 feet wide, and these are very long access roads through our landowners' property. Just to give you a sense of what, these are 3 wireless sites in the county right now, and you can see that those don't have 20 feet wide roads. They have 12-foot wide roads, as you can see from that car park there. And that's standard. I mean, you know, because you don't have heavy trucks going through this. You have the sites constructed, and then once or twice a month at most, someone comes in there to monitor that and make sure everything's okay. So that's our request as to the road. We would prefer, rather than a 20-foot wide graveled road sufficient for 75,000 pounds, we would prefer something like, something like this, which is a 12-foot wide road. And I believe that's my presentation, unless you have questions.
I have a question. Do we understand what the impact will be to the area with respect to like the propagation, like the topography, what additional coverage this would provide, what areas specifically it would cover?
Verizon does have propagation maps, but we have not provided them based on the 2018 legislation adopted last year. The new legislation is intended to streamline providing wireless access to rural areas and broadband across the Commonwealth, and some of the application components that were routinely required by counties, such as propagation maps, to evaluate whether the provider needed the site or not, are no longer permitted to be required, and so those were not provided to you. But I can tell you that we certainly do need the site. I mean, I think all the residents in the area would corroborate that statement. And the determination is made by the radio frequency engineers at Verizon. It seems to be a difficult area.
Members of the Planning Commission, this is your first tower case since the adoption of 2018 state law that did have, the bulk of the state law dealt with small cells, but there were a couple of things that dealt, and this is with these tower applications. That's one of the reasons why we changed the construction time to 2 years. That was a part of last year's state law. And unlike in Goochland, where we are so eager really to improve our broadband capabilities, and so we're happy to see a propagation study that shows, wow, we're going to get some better coverage. In other jurisdictions, they may have been used to say to providers, no, you don't need this, and so by state law, they were, said that they can't be required. So that's just a change that we haven't dealt with and happy to comply with, but that's why there's some changes in this application.
Thank you.
Is it common practice for counties to require access to this tower?
It's not unusual to see a provision that requires the owner of the structure to provide room for emergency services. In the locations I've worked on, it's a little more unusual to see a right of first refusal. I've seen that once or twice.
And that's saying every time you all go to market an extra site, you have to come to the county and say, do you not want it?
The language in the condition now says that every time another wireless provider or anybody who wants to put a set of antennas on that site comes to us, and by us it would be KGI, which is the intake manager for co-location, we would then provide notice to the county that we've received that interest, so the county could say yes or no about that location on the tower. And Verizon's willing to give that right of first refusal, but not willing to give it for no rent.
And just so the commissioners understand, the county actually has an ordinance with respect to the right of co-location. The condition provides a little bit more of the framework, because like the timing of how long we have and so forth isn't in the ordinance. And again, we've been working with the applicant with respect to trying to meet the timing needs that they have and us. Those discussions have been continuing even to shortly before the meeting. We just didn't get a chance to finish winding it up.
Do we feel like from the legalese that you all will come to a conclusion that's agreeable between the county and the applicant with regard to that if it were to move forward?
I do, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, will 5G reduce the amount of towers required?
The short answer is no. 5G is typically provided by small cells in urban areas to provide what's called densification, more data transmission in areas of dense population, or at places where people gather periodically, you know, such as a pavilion where you have music events or sports events, that type of thing. And 5G will be what helps fuel the Internet of Things and all of those future wireless devices that we'll be using. Right now, all of our facilities are for 3G and 4G, such as the one we're proposing today. But just because we'll have more and more small cells, I read somewhere that we could have 800,000 small cells by 2026 in some of these urban areas. That definitely does not mean that we will have fewer cell towers. In fact, we're still needing more and more cell towers, not only to provide coverage. There are areas in Virginia that still have poor coverage, and we're trying to make that better. But because areas that have good coverage have more and more people using more and more data transmitting devices, streaming and taking pictures and sending pictures, all of those things use more and more data. So we need towers for capacity reasons. And so a lot of times we'll need a tower, not for coverage, but for capacity, because we have that much data transmission going on.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right, thank you.
So we will now open the public hearing. Anyone wish to come forward in support or opposition? Seeing there are none, we will close the public hearing. Any questions, comments for staff? I know that we had a couple concerns from the applicant with regard, or at least one concern with the applicant with regard to the gravelled area of the easement.
And if I might, again, there was sort of dual communication. We had been in touch with the fire marshal and the building official, and the applicant had as well. The information that I received back was that the 20-foot road was required because of fuel that was going to be stored on the site to power a generator. And the applicant had been making a proposal to see whether changing the type of fuel mattered. And it didn't, from what I saw, but the applicant was then able to have a conversation with the fire marshal, and she believes that if that there's a potential they may not have fuel on the site, and that may get them to a 12. I don't doubt the applicant, but we just don't have that feedback yet. And again, it's been ongoing. She sought the information from folks in the earlier, and so I just think that isn't yet finalized. But is being considered by what we would consider our experts.
Since it's a code requirement for the 20 feet, there's a waiver process that they could go to, but talking with Mr. Davies, the fire marshal, he was not in support of a 12-foot wide road, just for safety reasons.
So I'll ask this question. Would the applicant be okay with the 20 feet if that depended upon the conditional use permit being recommended for approval?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For this site, we would rather have the approval with that condition than not have the approval. I just want to interject, though, it could be a real problem for other sites, particularly for the next site we have before you coming in your next cycle. It could be a real problem. So that's why we did want to talk it through, even if it's possible for this site.
Thank you.
Have the other ones been 20-foot gravel? The previous ones that we've approved?
To my knowledge, yes.
Yeah.
These pictures we were shown were not 20 feet wide.
I'm not
These
sure.
are maybe 20 feet, but the roads that cell tower sites I'm familiar with in the county, the gravel area is not 20
I mean,
feet.
to have a wide 20-foot area is gonna make them much more intrusive into the landscape of the county, for sure.
And I don't know, you know, if that area has just grown back over time and hasn't been maintained to 20 feet.
Well, I'm sure it's got to be cleared 20 feet just to get a tower in there.
Right.
But then maintaining a 20-foot wide, what'd you say, 75,000 pound road?
Correct.
Seems
4
like
inches
a
of
little
gravel.
overkill. You certainly don't have that access to houses.
Did you have a question?
No, I guess I'm just making a statement.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, it's at the purview, it's the code and the fire marshal, or they can go through a waiver process.
I mean, Ms. Hunter.
It's based on the 2012 fire code, which the county in 2015 adopted as part of their building code. So it is a code requirement to have this. So all uses have to have a 20-foot wide gravel path that can sustain the 7,500 pounds. There is a waiver procedure, which is why usually we don't put code requirements in as our conditions. However, because there was a waiver requirement, we did include it in this. We had a very in-depth conversation with both the building official and the fire marshal over the last several days about this condition. They are concerned that if somebody was working on the tower, someone decided to climb the tower, so there's some public safety, if somebody fell or there was some sort of emergency at the tower, the only way they could get to the site is with a ladder truck. And the ladder truck needs that 20 feet with the 7,500 pounds. So they did not feel comfortable waiving this at all. They felt like it was an important part of the request.
That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions, comments, concerns, the applicant, staff? Anyone like a motion with an additional?
I'll move we pass it as it is.
Any comments with regard to any exceptions or as stated?
It seems they're going to work it out with the attorney, so
But in the CUP, we have the language with those the requirements, so it's binding to the CUP, correct?
That's correct. Right now, the language in front of you to approve is the county's language.
Correct.
And we are talking with them about trying to not hold them up for 6 months. But right now, the language is the most favorable to the county.
So I think the one thing that seems that is being worked on that with regard to the lease, it sounds like both parties are working to an agreement on that. Does that language need to be in the CUP finalized, or can we, how can we make a motion?
Mm-hmm. The CUP language that's in front of you has what the county originally would impose, which is 30-day notice and 6 months to hold it. We're in conversations with Verizon to shorten that time frame, but we don't yet have that last final agreement to shorten it. The county would be willing to but so this protects the county the most. We are willing to revise it to make it less time to try and meet Verizon, and we're just trying to reach agreement on that. But the county's protected by what's in front of you, and if we revise it between now, it'll be to the benefit of Verizon in the way that we would revise it.
And would that need to come back before the commission for that revision?
No, it's relatively minor.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be considered like a material or something that would remand it.
Right. So I think for the interest of the county, and if things change, I think, you know, if it's a consensus for a motion to recommend approval, that we do it as is, and if there are waivers that need to be put in place and are accepted by county, or with respect to the lease, you all work that out subsequent to conditional use permit.
That's correct. And again, we do prefer to try and get things straight, but the applicant's been in contact,
Right.
we have as well, with the other people we've needed to. It just hasn't come together the way we would have liked, but not because anybody's trying to hold out or wait until the last minute. Just wanted to make sure that you were aware it's not been that situation at all.
And I would say that I travel that road sometimes several times a day, and there are dead zones in the fairgrounds, Maidens area for sure. Do we have a motion?
And the last thing I would just mention
Yes.
is because you actually had conditions in front of you, your motion would be as amended, but that's only because of what has been presented to you as amended from the packet.
I move we approve it as.
So we have a motion to approve. We have a second from Mr. Myers. All those in favor? Aye. Recommend approval. Mrs. Parker?
We have no old business, but we do have 2 items under other business. Our first item is the adoption of the 2019 Planning Commission bylaws. Ms. McGee?
Gentlemen, I did not prepare a PowerPoint for you, for me to speak from here, but I would like for your purposes, as well as for the public, just to go through the changes to your bylaws. Since this is your annual meeting, staff always takes a review of your bylaws and recommends changes. As you know, we discussed these at the work session last month. They're in your bylaws with highlights for where we're making changes. The ones that I don't discuss is simply they weren't substantive, they were simply wording changes. So on packet page 65, there's some changes to the proffer statement being submitted before the board and the time frame. That really is just a clarification of what has been happening. It is not a substantive change, but makes clear that the proffers that get resubmitted need to be signed and revised proffer statements, and retains your right to waive a deadline if you get proffers changed after that. Then on packet page 66, your time limits have changed. Used to be if somebody wanted to speak on behalf of a group, the chairman at his discretion could allow up to 10 minutes for that person to speak. Staff proposed a change to your bylaws to make them consistent with what the Board of Supervisors currently allows for group speakers, and that is that if a citizen wishes to speak, other citizens can come to the microphone, identify themselves, and then cede 2 minutes of their time to the group speaker for a total of 10 minutes. And that was proposed to you because citizens are better prepared to speak if the rules are the same at both the board and the Planning Commission. So that's easier and better for our citizens. Then at the bottom of page 6, the applicant's ability to reserve time for rebuttal is already something that you allowed. We're simply putting it in our bylaws. And one mark there, then speakers not being grouped into categories of support or opposition. We discussed, and it was the Commission's request at your work session, to include that in your bylaws, because otherwise it was at the chairman's discretion. Again, this would make you more consistent with the board, so forth. Then finally, if I go over to packet page 68, there is a clarification, really not a change, about the Commission's ability to hold an election to fill an officer position during a vacancy. And then there is change with respect to your subcommittees. You have a nominating committee that this year was 2 people. Under your bylaws as written, if they meet at all, it's supposed to be open to the public and with FOIA and so forth. Your practice is more that not necessarily occur. So we've simply rewritten this to say that you all will make sure that any committee or subcommittee would comply with FOIA which is when there's 3 planning commissioners meeting. And so that is a change, but it just puts you in compliance with state law and with what your practice was, which was a 2-person nominating committee didn't come meet and put out FOIA notices. So those are the proposed revisions for your bylaws for your consideration this evening.
And we need a motion on this. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Do we need a public hearing? Let me back up. We do not need a public hearing. That's what I thought. Sorry, didn't want to jump ahead. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And Mrs. Parker.
Our next item is the Planning Commission 2019 and 2020 calendar adoption, and we'll need a motion and a vote.
Did we have any issues with any of the dates? I'm not looking at it right at the moment.
We made the change for the January meeting as requested to be the 9th, and everything else is the same.
Okay, yeah, do that right after New Year's.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And great. And our July, early July meeting is pushed back to June, just like, before. Great.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, we do.
All right. Thank you.